Hi guys, today we were talking about the dependent and independent variables as part of designing a good experiment. And so the take home for today is you guys should be able to identify an independent and dependent variable and tell us what a variable is. And so the first part of today we talked about what a variable was, and that is the part of the experiment that you can in fact change. Then we identified what the independent variable was. We referred to that as the part of the experiment that causes something to happen. So the one word answer that we went with was a cause. The second variable that we talked about was the dependent variable, and we referred to that as the effect on the experiment. And so we went through a number of examples. One particular example I used in some of the classes today was referring to drinking soda and whether or not it rotted your teeth or caused tooth decay. And so we had to identify what was the independent and what was the dependent variable. And so first, when you're talking about an experiment of that nature, first you're going to pick out what the variables were, and we decided that soda was one of the variables and the other one was tooth decay. And then we had to figure out which one was the independent and which was dependent. To answer that question, we started to write a sentence. In that sentence, we would say the blank causes the blank to change. And so for that experiment, we talked about whether or not we would say the tooth decay causes the amount of soda to change. Or you could say in that sentence, the amount of soda causes the tooth decay to change. And if you write the sentence that way, it seems to make more sense. The one that goes first in the sentence, the cause, that is going to be your independent variable. The one that goes second in the sentence is going to be your dependent variable, that is the effect. So the cause in that situation was the soda, and the effect was the tooth decay. As for tonight's homework, let's look at one of your questions here. The time it takes to run a mile depends on the amount of exercise a person gets. So the two variables that we can pull out of that sentence, the amount of exercise is one variable, and the other one is time it takes to run a mile. So again, we're going to take those and put those into the sentence to see which makes sense. The time it takes to run a mile causes the exercise to change. Doesn't quite make sense. Let's try the other way. The amount of exercise causes the time it takes to run a mile to change. And that does make sense. The more exercise you get, the lower your mile time would be. And so in that first example, the independent variable is going to be the amount of exercise that you get, and the dependent variable will be the time that it takes to run the mile. I'll give you guys one more. Let's go down to let's try number 7 here. The score on a final test depended on the number of study questions the student completed. And so we're looking for the two things that we could get numbers out of. And so one of the variables is the score on the final test. The other variable is going to be, where else we can get a number? The number of study questions the student completed. And so we're going to take those two, put them in a sentence, and see which makes sense. And so our first one is the score on the final test causes the number of study questions the student completed to change. Doesn't quite make sense. Let's try it the other way. The number of study questions the student completed causes the final test score to change. That does make sense. So in this case, the independent variable will be the number of study questions completed, where the dependent variable will be the final test score. Again, we talked about how to set the experiment up. We use the dry mix to help us remember what it is. And remember, the dry mix stands for D stands for dependent, R stands for result, Y tells you that it goes on the y-axis. The mix part of it, M stands for manipulated, I independent, and the X goes on the x-axis. All right, good luck tonight, guys, doing your independent variables, and we'll talk about more about those tomorrow. Okay, take care.